Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and I want to start this podcast off by saying thank you. The love, the support was crazy last week, and thank you so much for all of it. And please continue to listen. This will be a weekly podcast on all things adoption. And if you so happen to be watching on YouTube right now, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I wanted to create a safe place to talk about all things adoption. It's been a part of my story for as long as I can remember. And I always knew it was an important story, but I didn't realize how much people needed to hear stories like mine and other adoptees and adoptive parents and birth parents. I didn't realize how important our stories truly are until right now. I also didn't realize that so many adoptees are hurting, are angry. And I pray that my podcast can help people begin to heal from some of the adoption trauma that they have in their lives. I truly pray that not only can this podcast be a place for healing, but even a place for education. If you are considering adopting a child, I pray that my podcast can give you some insight, give you something to think about, maybe another way to think about things. To my adoptive parents, I pray that my podcast can give you some tools to possibly help, especially if you're still raising your child, or let's say, you're trying to work through that adoption conversation. I pray my podcast can help you do that. I just want this to reach the masses because it's important. And without further ado, I want to jump back into my own personal journey. Now, if you missed part one of my adoption story, you're going to have to go back and check out the first podcast, okay? So I left off in my story. I found out I was adopted very young, and we lived in Tampa. And at this point, I've gone through middle school and I'm in my 8th grade year. And we moved to Orlando. And I am finally with my sister cousins. And honey, we are living our best lives, okay? Everything that you do in high school and with your cousins and with your friends, we did all that. The football games, the basketball games, the dances, proms, homecoming. I personally was on the dance corps team at my high school, all through high school. So that in itself, being a part of the band, was an amazing experience. Shout out to West Orange High School. And we were just living and still vacationing together, still going to family reunions together. Like, my family is so dope, and I'm so blessed to have that. And we had a lot of fun. Don't worry, cousins. I'm not gonna tell the stories because we got some stories, but I ain't gonna tell it, y'all. Settle down. And so, all of us graduate from high school. All of us go off to college, and I followed my two older cousins to what was at the time the Bethune-Cookman College. It is now Bethune-Cookman University. Hail Wildcats. And we're just living life. So I graduated high school in 1993. And that summer, before I went to college, my mother gave me my adoption certificate. And along with the certificate was the information that they were given, the rest of the information that they were given when I was adopted. And the things that I learned on top of what I already knew was that um, I remained with my mother for the first 24 hours, with my birth mother for the first 24 hours. I also learned that at the time of my birth, she already had a 2-year-old son. I also learned that it was because my birth mother was a minor, it was my maternal grandmother's decision to give me up for adoption. And finally, I learned that the agency that my parents went through was the Children's Home and Aid Society of Illinois. Now, of all of that information, I heard 2-year-old brother. That's what stuck out to me. So now I'm like, I have a brother somewhere out there? Because during my younger years, as I envisioned and imagined, the only person I was ever thinking about was my birth mother. I had never considered any other family member. Not a grandmother, not my birth father, not aunties, uncles, cousins. The only person I ever imagined was my birth mother. And now I'm imagining this brother, this biological brother that I have. And I'm 18 years old and I get this information and I'm still not mad because now I have more pieces to the puzzle and I'm like, well, okay, she was young and I was baby number 2. And I don't know what their living circumstances were like, but I knew that they were in Chicago. So I imagined that it probably wasn't the best. And so I understood why I was given up for adoption. I got that. And I wasn't angry. My curiosity is through the roof, as you can imagine, but I wasn't mad. And people have asked me, didn't that make you feel like abandoned? Like, why did they keep one and not the other? No, it didn't make me feel like that at all. Maybe because of the type of family I was raised in, I didn't feel like I skipped a beat. I didn't feel like I missed out on anything by not being with them. The curiosity was there because I think it's just natural. You want to know where you come from, what your people are like. Do they look like you? Do you have traits like them? Like some of the things that you do. Where did you get this from? I want to know those things. And so she gives me this information, and I'm like, okay. So I go through my freshman year of college, and by the summer of 94, my life begins to go out of control. And it remained out of control from 94 to 97. I'm going to put a pin in that part of the story. That's for another podcast. I do want to pose a question at this point, and you guys let me know. What do you think is better, closed adoptions or open adoptions? And for those that don't know the difference, a closed adoption is where the birth family and the adoptive family have no contact whatsoever. The adoptive family can receive whatever medical information is available to them at that time. But if any medical information arises afterwards, you won't get it because everything is closed and sealed and it has to be opened by a lawyer. On the flip side, when you have an open adoption, the birth parents and the adoptive parents make arrangements and there is communication. So behind a personal preference and then whatever your state laws may be, I'm wondering what you might think is the best way to go about that. My adoption was closed. I did not have a lot of information, and I had very, very little medical information. From a medical standpoint, I wish I had had more, but my adoptive family just had what was available to them at that time. So, getting back to the story, I go through the summer of 1994, and by the end of the summer of 94, I'm supposed to be gearing up to go back to Bethune-Cookman for my sophomore year. And instead, I end up pregnant. And so going back to school was out of the question, but I did attend the local community college that fall. The whole time I carried my oldest son, it never one time occurred to me that this little boy could look like me. I never had that thought until the day I had him. And the very first time the nurses put him in my arms, I looked down at this little 6-pound, 12-ounce little baby and said, oh my God, this boy looks just like me. And at 19 years old, that was the first time I had ever laid eyes on any other human being that looked like me. That was wild for me. And cool all in one. And I remember just staring at him because, like, wow. And like I said before, if you are raised around your biological people, that is something that you have no reason to think about because you're always looking at somebody that looks like you or favors you. That was quite an experience for me. And then as he grows up, we heard all the time, boy, you look just like your mama. Oh my gosh, you look just like your mama. Like all the time we heard that. We even heard, you guys have the same face. And we really did, because when I could see it, and a person looks like you when you can see it. Like I could look at him and see myself. I had never experienced that. So I have this little baby, and we're in the spring of 95. I'm dating this dude at this point, and through a series of events, the three of us end up moving to Chicago. And because I'm in Chicago and my curiosity is what it is, I decided to reach out to the Children's Home and Aid Society. And when I finally heard back, I received this letter, which I still have this letter to this day. And it's dated June 18th, 1995. And the letter says, Dear Tarsha Quarles, which is my maiden name, I am writing in regards to your request for post-adoptive services here at Children's Home and Aid Society. I am pleased to let you know that the services you requested will be available to you shortly. The fee for non-identifying background histories has remained at $75, and as initially quoted, the fee for search services is $150. If financial difficulties are present, a sliding scale fee or a payment plan may be initiated. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to notify me of your receipt of this letter and your continued desire to receive post-adoptive services. And then it goes on to give me the contact information of the person I need to work with. Honey, you couldn't tell me when I received this letter that I wasn't about to find my people. And we were about to have this great reunion and kumbaya, the end, because that's how my mind works. And so I was so excited. I didn't call. I didn't write back. Honey, I took my little self down to Jefferson Street to this adoption agency, letter in hand. Can I speak to such and such? And let's rock and roll. They let me know. Now, I didn't have a lot of money at this time. And I know there is a big conversation out there about adoption agencies and fees and money. And the only thing I remember is they worked with me on that sliding scale, but I don't remember how much money I paid for services. And I wish I could tell you. So I go down and they give me the non-identifying information that my parents had already given me. So this information I have. The only piece that I learned was my birth weight, which was 5'3". I was a tiny little baby. Other than that, I had all the other information. So the next step, they told me that because my adoption was closed and my records are sealed, what they could do was look in the phone book to see if they could find my biological family. And if they could find them, they would reach out and ask them if they want any contact. So I'm like, cool. Okay, what do I need to do? And I fill out the paperwork and the request and everything. And, we have conversation and just let me know how things can go. It could go one way or it could go another. They talk to me about these things, but my brain was like, everything's getting ready to be cool, right? So I scheduled my appointment and I come back about a week later and I sit down with the social worker and she said, well, we found them. And I was like, really? Then she goes on to say that whomever they spoke to said they did not want any contact. And I was like, what? Because remember, I had pumped my head up. I had and they told me, they warned me. It could go either way. My brain just doesn't work like that. I'm not wired like that. I need the positive. But that's not how it played out. And it stung. I'm not even gonna lie. It stung. And for the very first time, I can say I experienced a level of rejection that I had never experienced before concerning my adoption. Now, in hindsight, I think the reason why it didn't affect me to the level that it could have is because I was going through my own little personal hell during that time of my life. And I didn't have time to sit in that because I'm over here trying to survive. I'm trying to live. I'm trying to raise this little baby. I'm dealing with this dude. And I got a lot going on. So it did not, while it didn't discourage me, it did sting. So, but it never made me want to say, well, you know what? Okay, they said no. I guess it is what it is. I just didn't feel like that. And I cannot explain why I didn't feel like that. I just knew I'm going to have to do something different or try at another time or something. So as the age of the internet progresses and we get savvy with technology and we get savvy with social media and, all these search engines start coming on the scene, I start to play around with the information that I have by having access to public records and I just started digging over the years. And I never turned up anything. I didn't learn anything, but maybe it was my own personal coping mechanism. But I would, dig on the internet from time to time. And it would be another 15 years before an opportunity presented itself for me to move forward in finding my biological family. And I am going to stop the story right here. And if you want to know what happens next, you got to come back and tune in to episode number 3, which will be the final part of my adoption story. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please give me your comments, your questions on Instagram. You can DM me at the Adoption Journey Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the Adoption Journey Podcast. And if you're checking me out on Spotify, follow me over there. Thank you so much for all the support. Bye, family.